right, we're turning our attention now to the latest from the Middle East, the United States, saying that there's an indication that Iran is preparing to launch a ballistic missile attack against Israel. And we do understand that Iran has fired a salvo already of ballistic missiles at Israel and today. And of course, this is in retaliation to Israel's campaign against Tehran's Hezbollah allies in Lebanon. Remember, this is coming just days after there was that killing there of Hassan Nasrallah, and Iran has of course vowed that his blood is not going to be spilled in vain. And of course we do understand that alarms sounded across Israel and explosions could be heard in Jerusalem and the Jordan River Valley after Israelis piled into bomb shelters. Let's get the latest now as we speak to our international news editor Sophie Mokoena to understand exactly what is going on. Sophie, thank you so much for your time this evening. Certainly this is breaking news at the South. There's also word from Washington, and we're also seeing what's developing online.
Yes, we saw those missiles. When you look at the visuals that came in, I think even now on Reuters Live, you'll see that indeed Iran has been able to launch those missiles. We are told by the Israel Defense Force that it's hundreds of them, and some of them have already landed in certain areas in Israel. But secondly, on the ground, there was a mass shooting in Tel Aviv and in Jaffa. And you can see now the attack or the retaliation is coming in different directions. The IDF, Israel Defense Force, has admitted that these missiles will definitely have an impact, but it's not clear in terms of impact, perhaps in relation to casualties. But clearly this is a massive retaliation. We saw yesterday the Prime Minister of Russia arriving in Iran, and we could then speculate that something was happening and everybody's trying to speak to Iran. We saw even the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, late last night, midnight our time, going to his office. And you could see that something is happening. So later today, just towards the evening, America did issue that alert calling its citizens to leave Israel and also to leave Gaza and Lebanon. And I think the intelligence of the U.S. had already informed the leadership of the United States of America that this is what's going to happen. And therefore, the question is, after launching these 100 missiles, how many will be able to land on the ground, and what kind of impact will they have? And on the other hand, the Iron Dome, how many will the Iron Dome be able to intercept? And therefore, as we speak now, the tension has escalated in the Middle East, and it is indeed going to be a very, very long night in the Middle East. We are told that the security cluster of Israel is currently meeting in the bunker, trying to map out the next action in terms of, as many would expect, that Israel would also want to retaliate. Earlier on, countries were persuading Israel to get out of Lebanon, and this then happens. We saw even the Secretary General of the United Nations, when you look at his account, pleading with stakeholders to cease fire and hold back. We saw also the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros. You know that when you have all these casualties, the World Health Organization will have to assist in terms of finding a solution to help those who will be injured. So I think tonight is going to be a very difficult night in the Middle East.
And of course, Sophie, this, as you say, cannot be viewed in isolation because there's been a number of, events that have also been taking place. I mean, you think about, for example, Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon killing, some, high-ranking Hezbollah commanders at the same time. And then you think about the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, which is also something that has been of significance in recent days and has really drawn not only, the reaction of Iran, but also at the same time, the reaction of even some countries around the world.
Yes, you know that when you have this kind of tension in the Middle East, the entire region gets affected. We saw earlier on today, including Turkey, saying that Israel must pull out of Lebanon. And many other countries in the Middle East made a similar request because they knew very well that this was going to be the end result. And fortunately, that will have an impact not only in those two countries, Iran and Israel, but the neighboring countries as well. Tomorrow, we may wake up to a challenge in relation to the oil production. Even the movement in the Middle East, as you try to protect the airspace, you are going to have a situation where movement is going to be affected. And therefore, it is not an event or what is happening right now. It's not something that Middle East can just sleep and say, no, we'll see tomorrow morning. I can tell you in many countries that are neighboring countries, already you see the leadership of those countries meeting and discussing and also talking to other leaders. For example, a country like Iran, it can only pull back if some of the South countries persuade Iran to do so. There's no way Iran will listen to the United States of America. But those countries that are friends to Iran can be able to speak to Iran and say, Iran, pull back. I know it might be like South Africa is punching above its weight, but the reality is South Africa does communicate with Iran. It's countries such as those that can persuade Iran to pull back. On the other hand, the United States of America will have to speak to Israel and many other countries in the West to say pull out of Lebanon because now this is escalating and it will affect the entire region.
Sophie, I'm going to ask you to stay on the line and we keep this live picture there as we're listening to these sounds of alarms that are sounding across Israel. This is a live picture there from Tel Aviv that we are bringing to you. So let's try to listen if we are still able to hear some of those alarms there. All right, of course, Sophie, let's continue then with this conversation. We'll bring you that live picture there as soon as we have it. And those, of course, as we understand right now, explosions have been heard in Jerusalem, missiles seen shot down over Jordan. This, of course, as the United States, it's saying that Israel is going to receive help from it to then defend itself. And Sophie, this, of course, is happening just days after we saw what was taking place in the UN General Assembly as well, where we saw Benjamin Netanyahu coming in to make his own address and some of the dignitaries there simply making their way out, but also seeing some of those who were in support of him staying on to hear what he has to say.
Yes, the world is divided. The world is divided. This can turn into a proxy war between powerful nations. Because you have countries such as China, countries such as Russia, who are supporting Iran. And you have countries such as the United States of America and countries, some of them, not all of them, and in Europe, supporting Israel. And therefore, this is a very, very dangerous situation the world finds itself in. You would recall Antonio Guterres in his speech last week, both during that summit of the future and during the opening of the General Assembly, warned the world that what's happening in the Middle East is likely to engulf the world into a crisis. And this is happening. And many people were saying this situation must be resolved But unfortunately, when you have a superpower that is sending arms and all the powerful weapons to one country, that country becomes arrogant, and therefore you can't negotiate peace. And therefore, many people are saying, you know, that during the Nelson Mandela lecture, the professor and Nobel laureate who presented that lecture, when he was asked what can be done to stop the situation in the Middle East and whether South Africa's position and the decision to go to ICC and ICJ will help. He said, we can talk and talk, there's nothing that's going to happen. Only one country can resolve that problem by stop, if it can stop sending weapons to Israel. And we know that country. And therefore, and like I say, so that's the issue here. You can stop this. The same with the conflict in Ukraine. If countries can stop interfering or adding oil, you will be able to resolve Ukraine. Now we're sitting with Ukraine, which is still not resolved, and the Middle East escalating.
And of course, Sophie, there, your voice, as you can hear possibly in the background, as we are now, just bringing up these particular sirens and, the alarms that are being sounded there in Tel Aviv. These are live visuals. And of course, we are going to be bringing you more of this particular story, especially as we now understand that explosions have been heard. There's been missiles that have been launched, about 100 of them. The Iron Dome, of course, at this stage, we still, don't know just how many of those it was able to intercept. And at the same time, you think about what has been taking place, in the lead up to this particular moment. And not so long ago, there was, of course, that particular matter of, just being resuscitated again around whether or not the ceasefire talks can even bear any fruit at all. As when you speak to different kinds of individuals on this particular story, as Sophie says, there's a very, clear divide of opinions. And Sophie, you and I, at some point, were talking about the explosion of the pages themselves. And that was another moment that was quite big there, because you think about the pages exploding, the walkie-talkies, going off the next day, killing quite a significant number of people.
Yes, those were indications that the tension was escalating in the Middle East. And clearly, we expected those countries to retaliate, even though many people were saying, no, it has been a threat. Last, we saw how the Iranians were tasted their nuclear, and the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, that they were saying is the cause. And we know why, because he was always seen as almost not so radical, a bit of moderate, and therefore I think that long process of responding had to do with that. And some people in Iran, in Lebanon, in Syria, we saw them taking to the streets last night. So today it was not going to be business as usual. When you go to the X account of the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, you can see that it has been updated. More information which speaks to today. It's not going to be one of those days between Israel and Iran. And on the other hand, the IDF also giving constant updates in terms of the situation. The spokesperson has just addressed the media and the nation, saying that this might have a serious impact. But as you hear the noise, I mean, it's a mayhem in Tel Aviv and also in Jaffa, because as soon as those missiles were launched, then on the ground you had people perhaps who have been planning, or person who went on a rampage, and therefore it is a very, very tense situation in the Middle East.
And also understanding, according to some reports there, that, the state television reporters had to lie flat on the ground during live broadcasts as, some of the journalists there were seeing missiles intercepted in the airspace there of neighboring Jordan. And of course, we are seeing reports suggesting that it's about 100 missiles that had been launched in this particular attack. And Sophie, when you think about the United States, right now it says that, when you see what President Joe Biden's Twitter account has tweeted, is that they're saying that they're now discussing how the United States is prepared to help Israel defend itself against these particular attacks and protect American personnel in the region. This particular, situation in the Middle East as well has also seen a divide of opinions in the U.S. as they're now heading towards an election as well.
Yes, I think this moment is going to also have impact in terms of the elections in the United States of America, because it will depend what the Democrats, through their President Biden and the Vice President, who's part of the presidency in the United States of America and is contesting elections, how they are going to react, and whether the reaction will convince Americans that this candidate can still lead the country in terms of the vice president. Can she be given those responsibilities, looking at how America is going to act? And I can tell you there's no way Donald Trump tonight is going to keep quiet, because he has always indicated that he is the one who can stop this conflict in the Middle East and in Ukraine. And this, again, now, it's playing into the election issues in the United States of America. Even though the elections in the United States of America are more about national issues and national questions, the international issue also does play a role. On the other hand, when America is saying we are going to assist Israel to defend itself, Iran has got friends. We are likely going to hear the same rhetoric from those who are supporting Iran. And we know who those people are. And that is why I'm talking about a proxy war, a proxy tension or proxy conflict. And that's something that the UN chief warned leaders last week, that check what's happening in the Middle East. We are heading for a serious tension. And we know that if the Middle East is affected, the economy of the world is going to be affected, because we won't be able to use those ports and the sea and the land to move goods from one country to the other. I can imagine in Yemen what they are saying right now. We may see Yemen joining the fray. You may see Hezbollah being, strengthened in terms of resolve to join. And all of this is happening ahead of the 7th of October. We know that it will be 1 year since those terrible scenes where many people were killed and some were taken hostage. And since then, there has never been quietness or peace in the Middle East.
And of course, as you are hearing the background noise there, that's Tel Aviv, as the sounds of alarms have gone off. And, Iran, of course, throughout the day, there was even talk of this. And as the hours went by, we then saw a number of reports speaking about the fact that Iran was preparing to imminently launch a ballistic missile attack, which has now happened. And of course, when you look at what the U.S. is now saying, that it is going to help Israel defend itself, but also speaking to its own citizens to then take precaution and also move out of Israel. But just to take a step back, there was, of course, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warning that there is nowhere in the Middle East where Israel cannot reach. And this is a Benjamin Netanyahu, Sophie, who has been very adamant that his country is going to do all it can to defend itself, and also still very much talking about the issue of the hostages, which has also been one of the sticking points as the ceasefire negotiations continue?
Well, Benjamin Netanyahu was emboldened after what Israel did in Gaza and the few days ago, what they achieved in Lebanon, including the issue of the people who died based on those communication devices. You can't see this in isolation of what's happening now. And therefore, he has made those utterances. And he will have to prove to the people that what he said, he is going to do in terms of convincing his people that, look, I'm fighting a just war, I will win. And therefore, he is going to retaliate. It's a fact. Israel is going to retaliate. So we don't know. Previously, we saw Iran launching some attack on Israel, but not really powerful action. And then Israel was able to pull back. But this time around, 100 missiles. And as I pointed out, the IDF has confirmed that this time around, they expect a serious impact. And therefore, they will then have come up with an even heavy approach in terms of hitting back. And so we don't know how is this going to pan out. And with the support of the Americans, you can imagine what's going to happen. And on the other hand, we don't know this time around, those who are supporting Iran, whether they will fold hands and just watch, or we might see something. As I pointed out, that you have countries that are supporting Iran. And this is not something that people can say is going to be tonight and the end of tonight. After this, we expect Israel to do something. And as I pointed out, ahead of the 7th of October, you will then see all these tension and the skirmishes and serious attack and launch of ballistic missiles. And on the other hand, I can tell you this weekend, many countries, we are going to see protests around the world calling for peace and also calling for those who are responsible to be punished. And you know, most of the time directed at Israel. So it is going to be a very, very long week, including weekend, until the 7th of October.
And if we can bring up another picture, as this is a live picture from Tel Aviv, but there is another picture of what's anticipated to be a briefing by the Israeli government. This is a picture on air right now. We are expecting that possibly any minute now we may see, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu come out to address the nation. Right in the face of this particular attack, because there have been fears that at this moment, given that, the way the situation is escalating so quickly, you can then see, and I do understand that we might have a briefing now. Let's try and listen in to see if we'll have a briefing now.
אנחנו לא מזהים איומים נוספים מאיראן במרחב האווירי. ניתן לצאת מהמרחבים המוגנים, ויש להמשיך ולפעול על פי הנחיות פיקוד העורף.
All right, we'll try and get you a translated feed there in order to understand exactly what is going on, because the IDF, as Sophie has been saying, is definitely going to be bringing us an update to say exactly what happens now and just how many of these particular missiles have they been able to intercept, and what then are the preparations in the hours that are to follow from here. Because you can, of course, understand right now there's a number of Israelis who are possibly, just fleeing to different areas in order to be able to take up shelter. And as Sophie says, this is not in isolation. There's been quite a number of moments that have led us to this particular moment. We are just inching closer to October 7th, which is the 1-year anniversary where we would have seen some of those hostages being taken by Hamas. And the ceasefire talks have been ongoing and at various points will then hit a snag. The big sticking points for Israel would be, of course, the issue of even some of the hostages. And as we bring in Mfundo to this particular conversation, Mfundo, of course, there's been, a lot of talk about this moment and a lot of people wondering what's going to happen, particularly after we saw Hassan Nasrallah, being killed, and a lot of people then saying that the world is now on edge.
It most certainly is, and one wonders what the response of even the United States will be at this point, because we understand that for them, they want to protect Israel or assist in defending Israel, because we saw that Joe Biden was among those who actually sounded the alarm that they're expecting that there will be some sort of a retaliatory attack from Iran, and it seems it has come to pass. Very worrying situation that we're seeing unfolding there.
And Sophie, stay on the line. Don't go away. We do have now a conflict resolution expert and risk-econ director, Dr. Kingsley Makoena, who we're going to be in conversation with as soon as we get his picture up, in order for him to just tell us if this moment took him by surprise, or was he expecting it, just like a number of people have been saying, that it may just come. Given what we have been seeing, the pager attacks, we've seen the explosions, we've also seen, of course, some of, in fact, the senior officials when it comes to Hezbollah also being attacked.
And there've just been heightened tensions for a very long time now between Iran and Israel. So many would probably say that to a certain extent they were expecting this. They just perhaps might have not expected that it would happen now, but most certainly that given the heightened tensions, it was something that would have happened sooner or later.
And of course, we still have Sophie on the line there with us as we wait then to bring up Dr. Kingsley Makoena, who will also be joining us for this conversation. Sophie, we may not have understood what the IDF was saying at the time, but of course, one would have expected this briefing to take place because it's going to be quite important, the plan of action now, particularly for those residents who now are going to be fleeing to shelter.
Yes, you know that they had to have things so that they can communicate with the citizens of Israel to allay fears and also to convince them that for any eventuality. His admiral has just spoken there. He says they are ready for them, and also saying that there is not the first time. This is not the first time this happens, and U.S. will be on their side, but also they are ready for them. And that speaks to, as I pointed out earlier on, that you would expect Israel also to embark on an action, retaliate, because this was a major missile attack on Israel.
All right, that line there to Sophie, we'll try to get it back up in order to just continue this conversation. But I do understand that conflict resolution expert and risk-econ director, Dr. Kingsley Makoena, is joining us now. Good evening, Dr. Makoena, and thank you so much for your time. Your reaction to the latest developments in Israel?
Unprecedented developments, quite scary moment. For the first time now, it means Iran has abandoned what it used to call strategic patience. So we are likely to see a spiral of conflict. We are likely to see also Syria joining because Iran is the closest ally of that. So we'd have to see how Israel is going to retaliate. You may have seen, Bongwe, yesterday, Netanyahu issued a statement to addressing Iranians that they have to distance themselves from a government, speaking literally about regime change. So these events that are taking place now are really unprecedented.
And of course, Dr. Makoena, I'm with Mfundo here in studio. And when you look at the moments that have led to this particular moment, we're inching closer to the 7th of October, which would mark a year. But you think about the twists and the turns in this particular, story and in this particular conflict. Certainly, there have been key moments. You think, for example, even at some point, the targeting of that Hamas command center. You think about the many who are displayed in Gaza right now.
You know, Israel would have to fend different conflicts in different fronts. And that's why the United States has been advising Israel that Israel won't be able to manage different conflicts. You may have seen Israel has withdrawn some of its ground forces from other parts of Gaza to really focus on sending them into Lebanon. Now, this event, this attack by Iran, it really changes the game plan. So we need to see how Israel is going to respond to this. But this are unprecedented moments. And the question that everyone has been trying to avoid the escalation, we're now speaking about a possibility of fully fledged war between Israel and literally some of the Arab countries.
Doctor, but some are going beyond just a full-scale war between Israel and Iran now. They're possibly thinking of a full-scale regional conflict based on what we've seen happening, especially if you look at Iran, you're talking about them having their proxies in Hamas in Gaza, you're talking about them having their proxies in the form of Hezbollah in Lebanon. Should we expect some sort of a full-scale regional conflict at this point?
It has begun. That's what everybody has been trying to avoid Iran getting involved in the conflict. Remember, Iran has issued out a statement when the leader of Hamas was killed in Tehran to say they're going to retaliate. And they've been issuing out statements that Israel will be severely punished. Now, these attacks on Tel Aviv are literally unprecedented. And we are now seeing a full-fledged regional conflict, because what are the countries that are involved now? You are having Syria. You know, Israel has bombed areas in Syria in the last few days. Israel is bombing Lebanon. Israel is involved in the conflict now with Iran. So you are speaking about the whole region being engulfed in the war. And you may have seen during the Security Council, during the General Assembly debate, Bongiwe, strong statements coming from the Arab leaders. So this is really unprecedented.
But is it something that the region can afford? I mean, tonight we're seeing from the Israeli military spokesperson, for example, who says that this attack was serious and will have consequences. And then you hear from Iran's UN mission describing the attack as legal, rational and legitimate, and saying that, and I quote, should the Zionist regime dare to respond or commit further acts of malevolence, a subsequent and crushing response will ensue. So is the region ready when we are hearing this war talk now?
The region is not ready for another conflict. The region has been trying to avoid this conflict with Iran. It has happened now. You will see tonight, Bongiwe, a diplomatic move to try to de-escalate. And people have been saying, you know, Israel is escalating and what de-escalate. So I think there will be efforts today to try to persuade Iran not to continue with the attack. And there will be similar effort, actually, to persuade Israel not to respond. But knowing the right-wing elements within the Israeli government, they are possibly going to push for retaliation. It will be a spiral retaliation. You may recall also, Bongiwe, that when the leader of Hezbollah was assassinated, before he was assassinated, he made a passionate plea for Iran to start joining the conflict, saying that now it's time to confront the Israelis from all fronts.
Doctor, I suppose there's really no likelihood at this point of de-escalation, because if I just take you back to Benjamin Netanyahu's speech last week at the United Nations, he actually said, and I quote, "There's no place in Iran that the long arm of Israel cannot reach," and that's the true of the entire Middle East. So meaning now, since Iran has attacked, most certainly there will be no place in Iran that will be safe. And this unfortunately speaks to the safety of civilians, that here nobody is safe at this point.
You know, Bongiwe, when Benjamin Netanyahu was addressing the general debate, he said the Arab world, actually, he said there's nowhere where Israel cannot reach, that Israel has to reach every part of the Arab world can reach Iran. But he forgets also that Iran has the capacity to reach Israel, any part of Israel. So this is a serious conflict, and I hope and I pray there will be efforts to try to de-escalate this conflict. And I hope Israel this time around will listen and try to de-escalate.
All right, these are live visuals there coming to live from Tel Aviv, and I do understand Dr. Mokoena, Sophie is still with us on the line, so please don't go away. We'll talk to you, both of you, at the same time. So, Sophie, as we bring you back into this conversation, you and Chief Antonio Guterres condemning the broadening of the Middle East conflict with escalation after escalation in a statement. And certainly, as we're watching these missiles being fired, we're listening to the panic as well, the alarms going off. This is certainly another moment that is going to lead to this country to be on edge as well.
Yes, I want to just read a paragraph from the IDF spokesperson.
Yes.
It says, in the last few minutes, the Home Front Command has sent messages to mobile phones in certain areas with life-saving instructions, directing people to enter protected space. You must reach the safest protected space in your vicinity. Upon hearing a siren, immediately enter a protected space and remain there until further instructions are given. The air defense system is fully operational, detecting and intercepting threats wherever necessary, even at this moment. However, the defense is not hermetic, and therefore it is essential to follow the Home Front Command instructions. You may hear explosions, which could be the result of interception or impact. Due to the variety of threats, alarm may be triggered in widespread areas. Stay up to date on the instructions via the official page of the Home Front Command and the IDF spokesperson. And therefore, it speaks to the IDF spokesperson earlier on was communicating this message, saying that a short time ago, missiles were launched from Iran towards the state of Israel. You are asked to remain vigilant and follow the Home Front Command instruction. And as you can see, the visuals there, those are the missiles, some of them being intercepted by the Iron Dome, but we don't know the impact. I think it will be clearer tomorrow in terms of the impact, and I guess many people are now in their bunkers. You know that this is the life the Israelis have come to know based on the tension in the Middle East, where most of the time they have to hide. I think even that meeting of the security of Israel is being held under a bunker. In fact, that's what was confirmed, and I think there they are discussing what action to take. As you can see, those missiles coming in fast and furious.
So it most certainly is a big question as to what actions will be taken specifically by Israel. But also a big question is the steps to be taken by the United States, because they have committed and stated on numerous occasions that they're prepared to do whatever it can to help Israel intercept anything Iran directs at them. Iran has now directed serious missiles on the side of Israel. So most certainly many are keen to see what exactly will be the action of the United States.
I agree with Dr. Mokoena that you will see many people joining this conflict now in different ways, supplying arms, some of them quietly on their own military personnel. You know that there's no way Syria is going to watch this and just go to sleep. You have a situation, Yemen is not going to just watch this and sleep, including Iraq, because there are some people who are sympathetic to Iran. But on the other hand, you have those who are sympathetic to Israel. And I think the country to watch is the United States of America, because they do have military camps in the Middle East. And therefore, for them to just send the artillery to Israel or helping Israel, they don't necessarily have to fly across Atlantic. They have lots and lots of military base in the Middle East.
And as we bring you in, Dr. Mokoena, I mean, listening to what Sophie has just read there, there's a part that speaks of just how devastating this escalation may be. And I quote, "You may hear explosions as a result of interception or impact." This speaks of what exactly is going on, the chaos on the ground. But as a conflict resolution expert, what happens now? Because we have been, seeing over time those ceasefire talks as they try then to resolve what's going on there. But if things are escalating to a point where Israel in itself is able to say, we're not sure if it's an interception or its impact, we simply don't know at this stage, but do follow the lead in terms of what happens next. So where does it place all these talks about trying to find a solution?
We know that the Iron Dome, each time you have a large number of missiles fired, it gets overwhelmed, and some missiles have landed. That's what Hezbollah has been doing. And that's what Iran is likely to do. It's likely to unleash hundreds and hundreds of missiles to try to overcome the defense system and so that they can hit their own target. But I think what Sophie is saying, it's quite correct. The United States has made a commitment to defend Israel. They've sent a large military contingent last week, actually, to the Middle East. But remember also, Bongiwe, that Iran has a mutual defense pact with Russia. Are we likely to see this spiraling out of control and igniting the Third World War, which everyone has been scared of? Because the Russians are likely to intervene too in defense of Iran should there be any attack by the Americans. And what does that mean? Does that mean literally a full-blown world war? I think that's where we are crossing our fingers. And that's why we've all been wishing that this escalation that Israel has been instigating will be managed. But unfortunately, Israel did not listen to anyone. And I think they don't even listen to Americans because the very right-wing elements in Tel Aviv are in charge. But for the very first time that Tel Aviv is under attack, I think they would rethink their strategic approach and decide perhaps maybe that it's time to give peace a chance. And we hope they would prevail. And there are a lot of people in Israel who would come and prevail for some level of calm. And I hope so, because this is really unprecedented.
Mm-hmm. Doctor, I just want to take you back and ask, could it be that Nasrallah's death is that straw that broke the camel's back here? Because over the weekend, there were still conversations where it was said that there were divisions. The supreme leader was not certain that the route of firing missiles would be the one to take. Perhaps they could still rely on some level of diplomacy. Do you think, though, that there was just a great level of anxiety among the conservatives in Iran, who even, it said in some reports, felt that even the safety of the supreme leader now was being compromised?
No, actually, Bongiwe, I think the supreme leader has issued out a statement that Israel will face a crushing defeat. That's what he said. I don't think that's the case. There may be differences between the hardliners and really the moderates within Tehran, but actions of Israel in Lebanon in the recent past, I think it has really emboldened the hardliners even in Tehran to say we have to respond to defend the Shia part of the Islamic faith, because this they are projecting as an attack on Shia Islamic faith. And I think they're going to get a lot of people within the Shia world who listen to them, from Damascus even to far apart. So this is really a huge problem. I think all efforts now should be spent to try to reach some level of de-escalation. It doesn't matter what people are saying that Israel has been escalating in order to de-escalate, but this is the time. If there's any time to make peace, this is the right time before the situation gets out of under total anarchy and lack of control.
All right, let's bring you this reaction there, a statement from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres appealing for an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon. UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric saying that the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country must be respected.
Now, I quote, they say an all-out war must be avoided in Lebanon at all costs, Dujarric said in a statement.
And of course, he further adds that Guterres spoke with Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati earlier on Tuesday, telling him the UN was ready to help those in need.
Now, the Secretary General's representatives on the ground will continue their efforts to do everything possible, we understand, to de-escalate the situation. Just as you say, Dr. Mokoena, that this would be the opportune time to try and de-escalate.
And Dujarric there, who's the spokesperson to Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, telling reporters at the same time that the UN peacekeepers in Lebanon, known as UNIFIL, had seen sporadic incursions by the Israeli military.
Now, Dujarric has also stated that they have not witnessed a full-scale invasion.
And of course, as we continue then to watch these developments, this is a live picture there from Tel Aviv, as we are telling you really about, the moment that it took to get to this particular point. And Israelis tonight fleeing for shelter as Iran launches missiles against Israel. And at the same time, you listen to the statement there by the spokesman of the military saying that you may hear explosions as a result of interception or impact, which speaks about possibly that maybe the Iron Dome could be overwhelmed, Mfundo.
Well, certainly it could possibly be, but one will probably find out, as Sophie stated, tomorrow morning, the true scale of the damage. But I want to take it back to Dr. Kingsley when he says that this would be the opportune moment to perhaps de-escalate. But who facilitates the peace talks at this moment when it seems that tensions are so high? I mean, we're hearing from Sophie that Yemen could get involved, because if you look at Yemen, they are sympathizers of Iran. We talk about the Houthis. If you look at Gaza, you're talking about Hamas. If you look at Lebanon, you're talking about Hezbollah. So who now quells tensions at this point? Who comes in to say, let us de-escalate? Could it be the United States? Is it now left to the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres? Who exactly calls for this peace and facilitates the peace?
The Russians and the Americans would have to talk to each other this time around, because the Russians have some level of influence on the Iranians. The Americans have some level of influence on the Israelis. And I think the two of them, they need to talk to each other to try to de-escalate this conflict. Of course, they have to pull in some other role players, such as China, the European Union, to try to assist in the de-escalation. The question here, Bongiwe, will Israel listen to them? Because they've been attacked now, and Israel has been projecting this strong mentality. Remember, Ariel Sharon at one stage issued out a statement that Israel strength lies in the fear of Israel. Now the fear of Israel and the invincibility of Israel has been really affected. Is Israel going to keep quiet and fold their arms? Netanyahu has made it quite clear that they're going to defend their people. They're going to retaliate in his message to the Iranians yesterday that if Iran dared to attack Israel, he will take action against them. So we are likely to see that.
And of course, as the Israeli military spokesperson saying that this attack is serious and will definitely have consequences. Let us thank you both for your time. That's conflict resolution expert and risk record director, Dr. Kingsley Mokoena. We also had our very own Sophie Mokoena, the international news editor, on the line as the story continues to break.
All right, and that's where we can leave it for this evening. Enjoy your evening further. Face the Nation is up next. Good night.